Plants, like these tiny diatoms encased in silica shells, grow in the upper layers of lakes and oceans. If enough carbon-rich matter is buried deeply enough for long enough, the Earth's heat and pressure turn it into fossil fuel. Woody plants make coal. Slimy plants, algae, will give you oil, and both of them give rise to natural gas.
When they first found petroleum, then oil went from just a lubricant to a fuel, and it made it valuable. One thing they realized was putting a price on oil is like putting a price on a pail of water. So in order to get the price up, they hit on the idea that they would have to make it appear to be scarce. In 1892, there was a convention in Geneva to determine what organic substances are. Well, the definition of organic is a substance with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And so it's usually a living substance. So at this Geneva Convention, Rockefeller took advantage of sending some scientists over who said, oil, petroleum, is hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Therefore, it must be derived from formerly living matter. Playing the game properly, when this scientific convention was over, they defined oil as the residue from formerly living matter. Well, that makes it a fossil fuel. I don't know why they decided to use the word fossil, but it says formerly living matter, it's fossil. There has never been a fossil found below 16,000 feet. We mine oil, or we drill for oil, at 30,000, 33,000, 28,000 every day of the week. It's called fossil fuel for the minds of the public to feel that it is an asset that is running out. If you know the world's oil supply, you know that it is not going to run out for an awfully long time. It is the second most prevalent liquid on Earth.
That were formed from ancient plants and organisms during the Carboniferous period, approximately 360 to 286 million years ago. As they died, they sank to the bottom of swamps and oceans, and over millions of years started decomposing under layers of sand, clay, and other minerals. Fossil fuels are sought-after energy sources because they have a high energy density. They are the world's dominant energy source. Fossil fuels are considered non-renewable resources because they take millions of years to form. Fossil fuels are also the largest emitters of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas which causes climate change. In addition, their production causes both environmental and human health issues. These concerns have triggered society to look at alternate sources of energy that are more environmentally sustainable and renewable.
They think all the energy we need can be supplied by building enough wind and solar farms and enough batteries. The simple truth is that we can't, nor should we want to, not if our goal is to be good stewards of the planet. To understand why, consider some simple physics realities that aren't being talked about. All sources of energy have limits that can't be exceeded. The maximum rate at which the sun's photons can be converted to electrons is about 33%. Our best solar technology is at 26% efficiency. For wind, the maximum capture is 60%. Our best machines are at 45%. So we're pretty close to wind and solar limits. Despite PR claims about big gains coming, there just aren't any possible. And wind and solar only work when the wind blows and the sun shines, but we need energy all the time. The solution, we're told, is to use batteries. Again, physics and chemistry make this very hard to do. Consider the world's biggest battery factory, the one Tesla built in Nevada. It would take 500 years for that factory to make enough batteries to store just 1 day's worth of America's electricity needs. This helps explain why wind and solar currently still supply less than 3% of the world's energy, after 20 years and billions of dollars in subsidies. Putting aside the economics, if your motive is to protect the environment, you might want to rethink wind, solar, and batteries because, like all machines, they're built from non-renewable materials. Consider some sobering numbers. A single electric car battery weighs about half a ton. Fabricating one requires digging up, moving, and processing more than 250 tons of earth somewhere on the planet. Building a single 100-megawatt wind farm can power 75,000 homes requires some 30,000 tons of iron ore and 50,000 tons of concrete, as well as 900 tons of non-recyclable plastics for the huge blades. To get the same power from solar, the amount of cement, steel, and glass needed is 150% greater. Then there's the other minerals needed, including elements known as rare earth metals, With current plans, the world will need an incredible 200 to 2,000% increase in mining for elements such as cobalt, lithium, and dysprosium, to name just a few. Where is all this stuff going to come from? Massive new mining operations. Australia's Institute for Sustainable Futures cautions that a global gold rush for energy materials will take miners into remote wilderness areas that have maintained high biodiversity because they haven't yet been disturbed. And who's doing the mining? Well, let's just say that they're not all going to be union workers with union protections. Amnesty International paints a disturbing picture. The marketing of state-of-the-art technologies are a stark contrast to the children carrying bags of rocks. And then the mining itself requires massive amounts of conventional energy, as do the energy-intensive industrial processes needed to refine the materials and then build the wind, solar, battery hardware. Then there's the waste. Wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries have a relatively short life, about 20 years. Conventional energy machines like gas turbines last twice as long. With current plans, the International Renewable Energy Agency calculates that by 2050, the disposal of worn-out solar panels will constitute over double the tonnage of all of today's global plastic waste. Worn-out wind turbines and batteries will add millions of tons more waste. It'll be a whole new environmental challenge. Before we launch history's biggest increase in mining, dig up millions of acres in pristine areas, encourage childhood labor, and create epic waste problems, we might want to reconsider our almost inexhaustible supply of hydrocarbons, the fuels that make our marvelous modern world possible. And technology is making it easier to acquire and cleaner to use them every day. The following comparisons are typical and instructive. It costs about the same to drill one oil well as it does to build one giant wind turbine. And while that turbine generates the energy equivalent of about 1 barrel of oil per hour, the oil rig produces 10 barrels per hour. It costs less than 50 cents to store a barrel of oil or its equivalent in natural gas, but you need $200 worth of batteries to hold the energy contained in one oil barrel. Next time someone tells you that wind, solar, and batteries are the magical solution for all our energy needs, ask them if they have an idea of the cost to the environment.
The main ingredient that makes them work is silicon, or sand, which comes from rocks found in a quarry like this. The first stage is to get the silicon out of the rocks, and that's done in this enormous furnace. Silicon is used to make everything from window glass to the processors in your home computer, and without it, a solar panel just wouldn't work. Huge barrels are used to carry it around the factory. Nothing else could withstand the immense heat involved. In this form, it is liquid molten silicon, but to make solar panels, certain chemicals need to be added to it. First, the ore needs to be crystallized, which occurs here in this cooling machine. Cold water is pumped round it as it works, which acts like watery air conditioning. The super hot crystallized silicon emerges from the machine. Solar panels are made using thin slices of silicon which have two unique layers in them. These are created using two chemical processes which affect the silicon at different times during production. This is where the first chemical is added. It will help make the silicon more conductive. To get the two combined properly, the tank is sealed into a large furnace and left for 2 days. When the buzzer rings, the cooking is complete. The furnace is opened and the silicon block emerges. Now it needs to be cut down to size. Diamond-tipped blades then slice through it, cutting individual panel-sized columns ready for the next stage. The slices must be separated to be cleaned, but no machine exists that's sensitive enough to do it without breaking them. It must be done by hand because the panels are barely fingernail width and incredibly fragile. The freshly cut slices must now be thoroughly washed before they can be treated with the second chemical. Once the treatment is in place, the panels are returned to the furnace and baked to create the two separate layers. The panels are also treated with an anti-reflective coating, which is painted on and then baked into place. And the next machine paints a layer of this grey gunge onto them. It's actually semi-liquid metal. We can now assemble a full-sized solar panel.
No matter how we make electricity, it takes up space. Electricity from coal requires mines and plants to burn it and convert the heat into electricity. Nuclear power takes uranium mines, facilities to refine the uranium, a reactor, and a place to store the spent fuel safely. Renewable energy needs wind turbines or solar panels. How much space depends on the power source. Say you wanted to power a 10-watt light bulb with fossil fuels like coal. Fossil fuels can produce up to 2,000 watts per square meter, so it would only take a credit card-sized chunk of land to power the light bulb. With nuclear power, you might only need an area about the size of the palms of your hands. With solar power, you need at least 0.3 square meters of land, twice the size of a cafeteria tray. Wind power would take roughly 7 square meters, about half the size of a parking space, to power the bulb. When you consider the space needed to power cities, countries, and the whole world, it adds up fast.
I was worried that global warming would end up destroying many of the natural environments. I thought the technical solutions were pretty straightforward. Solar panels on every roof, electric car in the driveway, that the main obstacles were political. The US invested $150 billion in renewables and other kinds of clean tech. But right away, we started to encounter some problems. So first of all, the electricity from solar rooftops ends up costing about twice as much as the electricity from solar farms. And both solar farms and wind farms require covering a pretty significant amount of land with solar panels and wind turbines, and also building very big transmission lines to bring all that electricity from the countryside into the city. Both of those things were often very strongly resisted by local communities, as well as by conservation biologists who were concerned about the impacts on wild bird species and other animals. One of the big challenges, of course, is just the intermittency of solar and wind. They only generate electricity about 10 to 30% of the time during most of the year. As the years went by, these problems persisted and in many cases grew worse. Some of the problems are just geographic. It's just you have to have a very particular kind of formation to be able to do that. And even in those cases, it's quite expensive to make those conversions. And in terms of solar, building a solar farm is a lot like building any other kind of farm. You have to clear the whole area of wildlife. And currently, the current estimates are that about 6,000 birds are killed every year, actually catching on fire above the solar farm and plunging to their deaths. You could make solar panels cheaper, you could make wind turbines bigger, but sunlight and wind are just really dilute fuels. And in order to produce significant amounts of electricity, you just have to cover a very large landmass with them. In other words, all of the major problems with renewables aren't technical, they're natural. We've been hearing a lot about how solar panels and wind turbines have come down in cost in recent years, but that cost has been significantly outweighed by just the challenges of integrating all of that unreliable power onto the grid. It turns out that even wind energy is more deadly than nuclear. This is a photograph taken of 2 maintenance workers in the Netherlands shortly before one of them fell to his death to avoid the fire and the other one was engulfed in flames. Here you can compare the solar farm I just described, Ivanpah, to California's last nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon. It takes 450 times more land to generate the same amount of electricity as it does from nuclear. You would need 17 more solar farms like Ivanpah in order to generate the same output as Diablo Canyon, and of course it would then be unreliable. And it just turns out that solar panels require 17 times more materials than nuclear plants do, in the form of cement, glass, concrete, steel, and that includes all the fuel used for those nuclear plants. In the effort to try to save the climate, are we destroying the environment?
Researchers will say oil is made up of all types of organic remains from the prehistoric times. And so the deepest a dinosaur fossil has been said to be found is around 1.5 miles beneath the earth. But the deepest oil drill is said to be around 6.5 miles beneath the earth. You see, for the theory that oil is actually fossil fuels would require a massive amount of animals and plants all to have been compressed through this natural process that turns them into oil. And so I could see how if dinosaurs were found 1.5 miles down, there would be plenty of other organic materials as well that would have been able to go through the process to become oil. And so I believe that crude oil has been determined to be fossil fuel in order to create an element of scarcity for oil. oil appears to be something that is being generated by this earth, and there's been many reports that oil wells have been depleted and automatically fill back up almost as fast as they can take it out. I have found reports and articles that this has taken place across the world. So I believe oil can be pretty much found all across the earth. And so oil was first said to be found around 1859. But there is contradicting reports because China was said to have been drilling for oil around the year 347. They were said to find oil about 800 feet below the earth. In fact, Chinese have been said to have been using fossil fuel coal as far back as 3,000 years ago, around 1000 BC. And so coal is said to be pretty much the same stuff, prehistoric remains of organic matter as well. But the first official recording of coal was said to be around 1679. And so according to these reports, oil and coal have probably been known to mankind for thousands of years, although modern reports suggest that crude oil is only less than 200 years old. And so I believe mankind probably knew about this oil for a while. It's just that they didn't really know what to do with it until about a couple hundred years ago. I believe once they started realizing that they could use it for engines and cars and stuff, that's when they really started to suppress the information about how it can be found and stuff like that, because there actually is many natural petroleum seeps on this earth. I mean, there's locations where oil just pushes itself up out of the ground through fractures of the earth. And these are called natural petroleum seeps. Oil is probably not as scarce as we have been told. And the earth does seem to be able to produce it naturally. Or could the earth be some type of organic living organism? There's so many disagreements about how oil is produced by these scientists that I believe that it's time that we begin to consider our own ideas about what oil actually is. I do not believe that it's a process that takes millions of years. In fact, there was a German chemist that documented evidence that oil can be produced by non-organic means. In 2009, the Royal Institute of Technology reported that they have proven that crude oil and natural gas can indeed be generated without plants or animals. And so most mainstream scientists used to reject this idea of abiogenic petroleum as an alternate explanation for how oil is formed, but they soon came around after the evidence became clear. And so they have begun to call this abiogenic petroleum, which is pretty much oil that is not connected to any organic origins.
No! What happened? I saw a terrible dream. I saw that the planet is out of fossil fuels.
If you want to see what is apparently my most controversial video that was banned from YouTube and BitChute, you can go to wagthedogtheory.com and view the whole uncensored version of the video. And I recommend downloading it if it is still there. And definitely check out my newest book, Fake Diseases. It covers all of the major topics that come up, like birth defects, blood sugar problems, bone and joint problems, cancer, autoimmune problems, and more. And it's on Amazon for just $9.99. And the audiobook read-along version is free here on YouTube, and the link for that is in the description of this video.